Hello everyone, I'm Brazen Eagle and thank you for joining me here. So today we have an article from HuffPost.com from 2011 actually, talking about how boys are being left behind in elementary school, middle school, high school, and even colleges. So, I'll point this out right now, but the writer or the author is Lori Day, a female, which is important to consider as we're going through this article. So, Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young saying that we should teach our children well and feed them of our dreams, but for millions of parents of sons, dreams are only that, and boys are falling behind educationally at an alarming rate in this country. And then she lists some experts, Richard Whitmire and Michael Gurian, and many other authors and educational experts proclaim that we have a crisis in the education of boys in this country. Gurian's book presents statistics that boys get the majority of D's and F's, failing grades in most schools, create 90% of the discipline problems, which is actually pretty true and honest, and are 4 more times more likely than girls to be diagnosed with ADHD and be medicated, account for 3 out of 4 children diagnosed learning disabilities, become 80% of the high school dropouts, and now make up less than 45% of the college population. Kind of a problem, especially if you want men to lead your society. So what do the experts say? According to Whitmire, children are forced to use literacy skills much earlier than in the past, and boys develop these skills later than girls. Well, maybe not. In the world of kindergarten is the new first grade, boys are struggling mightily to keep up. When it comes to writing, the gender divide is even greater. Do you realize that gender means nothing? Tell me about the sex differences. The sex divide is even greater. No child left behind, and our hyper-focus on standardized test scores is worsening, not ameliorating the academic struggles of boys, and subsequently increasing the number of boys who are turned off to go to school and eventually drop out. Absolutely true. I'll be honest with you, I have been in the classroom quite a bit, but whenever we had standardized testing, even boys and both boys and girls, they hate it. And the teachers hate it too, because you take time out of the day, take time out of the teaching, in which kids actually don't learn anything by taking tests, at least these standardized tests. According to Gurian, boys learn by doing and by moving their bodies through space. The more emphasis is placed on the development of early reading skills, and the less emphasis is placed on a healthy amount of movement and experiential learning, the more disadvantageous our schools will be for males. Basically, we are not learning by doing, we're learning by regurgitation. That's really what it is. Our boys need our attention, and although some of what I'm about to write pertains to girls as well as boys, and although our sex differences naturally fall across a continuum and no single description fits all boys or girls, there are nonetheless a number of characteristics that differentiate the two sexes, generally speaking. So I said in the article, or the beginning of this video, that the writer is female, which is why I'm bringing this up now. She, in this next part, goes on about growing up with boys and then raising a daughter instead of a girl. So this part really isn't too important to the article. However, if you want to read it for yourself, the link is in the description below. But let's move on to the next part, the nature of boys, which really comes down to this. As Gurian explains in his book, the primitive hunters, men, were the product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Spatially developed male brains resulted from physical interaction with the environment that allowed sensory input to stimulate the right hemisphere and build white matter and synapses in ways that would be useful for survival. Even though the concept of the square school with the square classroom with one teacher to 20 or more kids has been around for a few hundred years, our boys are still young hunters whose brains need the same types of stimulation to grow and be healthy as did their male ancestors a millennia ago. Our schools are vastly different than the setting of family, tribe, and natural environment that used to be the educational milieu for growing boys. Very, very true. Why our educational system does not support male learning styles. Our modern educational system works for many children, particularly girls, but for some boys and girls it places constraints on a very normal and necessary experiential type of learning, not to mention the need of many children to move around rather than sit still. This is the most important part. While it may be a cynical statement, I have often felt that co-ed schools are girls' schools that boys go to. Absolutely. Boys are punished because they are not girls, because they won't sit quietly in their chair. And yes, I've had to punish boys for doing that just because it's what you're basically forced to do as a person in the classroom. I'm not advocating for a return to life in caves and an educational system for boys involving the activities and rituals described in my college anthropology book. However, what this person, the author's arguing for, or advocating for, is a greater understanding and appreciation for the boys and who they are and their nature. Boys and girls learn differently. And, some can learn, similarly, but there are differences between the sexes. And now, how schools could honor who boys are. Simple changes to the pace and tempo of the day, such as incorporating several brief recesses throughout the day, devoting more time to physical education, and including more hands-on activities go a long way towards alleviating some of the natural restlessness of boys and harnessing the male energy in positive ways. How much Ritalin could remain on the shelves if we created schools that are ready for boys rather than boys who are ready for schools? This paragraph tells you so much. There's 3 things that I'm going to talk about here. First, incorporating several brief recesses throughout the day and devoting, more time to physical education is extremely important. When I was in the classroom at the schools, they would have gym. The kids would have gym at least, burn some energy and whatnot, but that sometimes just wasn't enough. During lunch, for like a half-hour lunch period, you'd spend 20 minutes having lunch, but then the last 10 minutes you would have recess, basically. The only real time for an actual recess in which boys, girls too, but boys can do, they can run around, they can play basketball, soccer, baseball, something to keep them entertained and keep them, moving throughout the day, which benefits the boys. And that was just so limited amount of time that helped, the teachers out, helped the kids learn better because they're spending all this excess pent-up energy that boys have, which is extremely important to realize that boys and girls are different physically, mentally, emotionally. The boys need more time to do physical activities. It helps in the classrooms when they're sitting still too. Second part of this, like I was kind of touching on in the first part, more hands-on activities. Absolutely. People, especially boys, but some girls too, that we learn by doing. Most of the time, the best teacher is by doing something yourself and then learning what was good and what was bad from what you just did. Learning by doing is one of the most important things that people need to pick up on, that people have to do. I mean, why do you go to school if you're not going to recreate a lot of things that you learn there? I mean, you go to school to learn how to live, right? But not in our modern day. No. In our modern day society, in our modern day educational society, we teach you subjects which are, good to know. Good to know, I'm not saying we shouldn't learn a lot of the things we learn, but we don't learn how to live. We don't learn what the future will be like, what we need to know in the future. And having hands-on activities to prepare ourselves, especially to prepare boys for the future, it's just not there. It's not in the schools. I mean, you can understand that a lot of the teachers are female. And because they're female, a lot of boys, especially nowadays, they don't have very much male influence, which is another reason why education is failing our boys. All they're being taught, most of the boys are just from what females say, from female influence, and they're getting very little male role models or influence at all. How to be a man. But anyways, third part of this paragraph is kind of important, but you might not have picked up on this. How much Ritalin could remain on the shelves if we created schools, blah, 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 blah. Ritalin, excuse me, if you don't know, is a drug that is prescribed especially to boys who cannot focus in the classroom or boys who have or are very close to having ADHD. Now, Ritalin, like I said, is a drug, but has some serious side effects. If you want to look it up for yourselves, go ahead. But I won't tell you that a lot of the time, not most of the time, but a lot of the time when I was calling parents home or talking to them face to face, they would tell me that, oh, sorry for my son's outburst today. It's because he didn't take his drug. He didn't take his Ritalin. We are literally drugging up our boys so that they become more effeminate. That's literally what Ritalin does to you. Anyways, This paragraph is extremely informative without appearing to be so. Just as we collectively address the needs of girls over the past couple of decades, blah blah blah, we need to turn our attention more towards the boys who are falling behind educationally. And kind of talks about the revolution of brain science that tells the differences, to confirm that we knew about the differences between boys and girls, that we basically said, boys and girls are exactly the same. And this talks about social and cultural influences are kind of impacting us, but not nearly as much as we think. We have a lot of medical evidence for why teaching boys and girls differently can be very beneficial. And that is basically the end of the article. What does the future hold? Just, boys are falling behind in education, even 8 years ago. I'm going to kind of talk about this last little part that I was talking about a little bit earlier. Basically, back then, 2011, which wasn't that long ago, but even 2019, we're just not teaching boys how to be men. We're not teaching kids how to be adults. We're not teaching them how to function for the future. We teach them like history, English, science, and stuff, but we don't teach them how to live. That's probably my biggest gripe, one of my biggest gripes with the modern, at least U.S., educational system. We don't teach people how to live. We teach them how to, do formulas. We teach them how to understand science, which is great. But how to live, how to, make money, be successful, how to get a job, things like that. Teach boys what it means to be a man, a good man, not one of these cuck soy boy men, but how to actually be a strong man, a strong, natural man. Someone who can see several different sides of an issue and then come up to his own conclusions. Someone how to, be masculine. We don't teach boys how to be masculine. We don't teach girls how to be feminine. I mean, if anything, we're teaching girls how to be masculine, and we're teaching boys that they're defective girls. That's basically the modern U.S. educational system. And it's very unfortunate as someone who's been in the classroom before to see this happen. And unless there's some major cultural shock to the system, this is just going to continue and get worse and worse and worse, especially as feminism just continues to destroy families. But with that in mind, my name is Brazen Eagle. I hope you learned something today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.